if we have an AI helping us generate content and companies that use our products have AIs that consume that content, then who's writing for whom? Is it possible that there's kind of a layer of AI talking to each other? And does that free us up to be focused on ideas and experiences? Or do we become, slaves shoveling coal into the big AI machine? It's a very weird future that we're looking at. And my hope is that by learning the strengths and weaknesses of AI, as AI becomes more capable, we start to think about work itself in a new way.
Welcome to the Culture of Writing podcast, where writers, editors, and content strategists from Salesforce talk about how we work together to improve our craft and make content better.
This is Peter Conrad. Why don't you introduce yourself? We're here to talk about AI.
Hi, I'm Peter Conrad. I'm a content strategist at Salesforce, and AI is of great interest to us in content because it does so many amazing things and has so many amazing potential pitfalls.
Okay, that's a good start. Amazing and pitfalls.
I kind of think that the amazing and the pitfalls go hand in hand. So imagine for a moment that an AI model was really as smart and knowledgeable as a smart, knowledgeable person, which it isn't today. Who knows what the future holds? Imagine that you actually were hiring a smart, knowledgeable person. Would you ever just let that person do their thing with maybe one person checking their work once in a while? No, right? But we're doing that with AI because it's doing so many amazing things. And that difference kind of both exhilarates and scares a lot of people, I think.
No, I totally agree. I'm laughing because I totally agree. What would some of the pitfalls be?
So the biggest one, I think, is that people aren't great at evaluating what the AI is good and bad at. The AI will never have the human experience. There's an epistemological concept called synthetic versus analytic statements. Analytic knowledge is stuff that you can come up with by putting other statements together, like apples are good to eat, therefore apples are food, or whatever. And synthetic statements are things that we synthesize from experience. And the difference becomes important because synthetic statements, there's a lot larger domain of those than analytic statements. And the AI can only operate in the domain of the analytic statements.
I've never heard it put that way. That's interesting.
Well, so that means that AI is very good at sparking creativity, kicking off brainstorming, taking ideas in new directions. It is not necessarily as good at things that rely on the human experience. So how does this sort of affect workers today who are using AI? There was a survey about a year ago, July of 2023, where they asked people how AI was helping them in their work, and they found out that in some cases it was actually making their work more difficult because they were spending time training models and so on and so forth. There was another survey conducted just this month. As of this recording, it's late July, early August 2024, and 77% of employees using AI said that it added to their workload today as well, which is interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Now you look at some of the things that Salesforce is doing with like customer service chatbots, and I think that's an ideal use of AI because people are kind of expecting to be talking to an AI on the front line. And it actually does a very good job because a lot of the knowledge that it's working with is knowledge that can be approached from the analytic point of view.
I agree with you because when you're dealing with a bot, you're expecting a bot, and most of them are terrible. And not sales. I'm not talking about our Salesforce, but I'm talking about just as a customer service experience with healthcare and finance and all of this. A lot of them are not quite what I would expect them to be. So I think it is a great use case. clearly you have wrote things that it can do, and it can do really well. And and I think there's a lot of technical documentation, yeah, that where it could absolutely help. But maybe if we can kind of look at some examples where we think, well, I know, let me stop trying to guide the conversation. Why don't you tell me? Because you're the expert here.
Well, expert is a charitable word, but well, when you talk about rote, computers are very good at rote, but AI is not exactly a computer in the traditional sense. So the way I think about it, which may or may not be a good representation of reality, is that it's almost like a chorus of voices. And if you ask a chorus of voices the same question again and again, you may get little variations, but you're going to get essentially the same flavor. So I sort of think of AI as being like a room full of smart interns who have access to the internet. But the reason I say that it's not rote is that there are certain kinds of repetitive tasks that it would be much better if you wrote a script. So if you can write a script that understands what improper use of the passive voice looks like, it'll find all of them. And if you ask an AI, it has better capability to do more stuff out of the box, but it isn't necessarily going to do that stuff reliably all the time today.
Yeah, and will it? I think we're all assuming it's going to get a lot better, right? I agree with everything you're saying right now. So I kind of would have thought it would be better at all of that by now, but I don't know.
Well, I think that part of the problem is, I want to come back to people again. Part of the problem is that we aren't great at evaluating what it's good and bad at. And because it's such a dancing bear, we kind of go, oh my gosh, it's just like a person. Well, it isn't. It doesn't think like we do, and it doesn't do things like we do, and it doesn't feel like we do, but it does a lot of stuff that resembles some things that we do, and I think it does some things better. So if you ask me to read the entire content of Wikipedia and come to some conclusions, or imagine a page that wasn't there or something like that, I won't do a great job at that because I just can't hold all of that in my mind at the same time. But that's exactly how AI is built, is that it has all this information, and now you can ask it questions about it. There's a computative linguist named Emily Bender, I think, who said that if you're comparing AI to people and you're amazed at what the AI can do, then you don't think too much of people, which I thought is a great quote.
So when you say it doesn't think like we do, I've heard that before. Elaborate on that a little bit, because that's interesting.
What everybody was saying last year, which is still true in some way, is that basically it's a predictive engine that figures out what the next word is going to be. And clearly we've seen the behavior. It's more than that. Now we're getting, a little philosophical here, but I feel like our feelings influence our thoughts a lot and allow us to make decisions very quickly. And if you had to only use propositional logic to make decisions, your decisions wouldn't be as good. But what AI is really great at is exactly that, to be able to make decisions or intuitions that fall outside of the box of what humans would think about. I think it was Jan LeCun who said, he's the chief of AI at Meta, who said he wishes it had been called artificial intuition instead of AI. So I think that one of the things that it's really great at is just exactly that. Like, you, from the content point of view, you could take an engineering spec and run it through the AI and say, who's the potential user for this feature? And then don't trust that answer, but take that answer to the product owner and ask questions. Say, is this right? Use it as the beginning of a conversation.
Talk about proposition. When you talk about propositional logic to a history major like me, what does that mean?
It's the whole if P then Q type of a thing. and the way that it gets exercised among non cognitive science people is like Robert's Rules of Order and stuff, where you can say something and someone says, oh, that's appeal to authority or whatever. But essentially just the idea of backing up every statement with statements underneath it to support it. And there are so many decisions that we make every day, many of them correctly, some of them incorrectly, that rely instead on experience, which interestingly enough, I think is maybe a little bit more like predictive AI. So if you marry predictive and generative AI, maybe you do get something that can better model the human experience. I don't know.
Yeah, what would you call, so what's the difference between predictive AI and generative AI?
Generative AI is the thing that we're all playing with right now, where you give it a bunch of information and then ask it to create something new. And I want to stress that the something new is at the heart of what makes it so amazing, and also at the heart of the pitfalls, is that you're asking it to create something which, because it's new, may be beautiful and plausible, but not really grounded in reality. And then predictive AI, also called discriminative AI, learns how to evaluate a set of information and decide what that thing is. So for example, there are now cameras that can be installed inside the cabs of trucks that can figure out if you're eating while driving or talking on the phone or not wearing your seatbelt, because it's seen enough video of what those activities look like to be able to identify it. And then things like optical character recognition, or machines in factories that detect flaws on the belts before they go out.
And then you talked about intuitive or artificial intuition, because I think, if I understand it right, our intuition or kind of gut reaction is kind of what we've built up over a lifetime of this experience, training our own model, right, our brain. Is that what artificial intuition would mean?
Well, so it's interesting, because for us, intuition comes from our lived experience, and we call it our gut, right? I think what the term artificial intuition means is not that, because we are dealing with something that encodes facts about the world that have been gleaned from, sucking up all the information online. It encodes them as vectors, which represent a position in 100-dimensional space that encapsulates meaning in some way, and it's doing all this math, and there are all these various layers in the model itself that pass information to each other. So it doesn't have a gut, and it doesn't have lived experience, but it has all of this information that's come in that can be expressed linguistically. And it's doing a kind of intuition that I think is a little bit more like what we do. I don't know if you ever read a book as a kid and came across a word and made a decision about how that word should be pronounced. And
Absolutely.
then you heard somebody say that word later on. It's a little bit more like that.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I remember reading Ray Bradbury's Medicine for Melancholy, and I pronounced it melancholy because I'd never seen the word before. And so when he said melancholy, I thought, it's not melancholy?
Melancholy, yeah. Well, Bradbury, of course, was it Bradbury or Heinlein who wrote The Moon is a Harsh Mistress? That might be Heinlein.
Heinlein, yeah.
Yeah, and that was the kind of theme behind that book, is that if you build a computer that's big enough, it becomes conscious. So it's very interesting to be sort of seeing how that really turned out. It's different from what Heinlein thought.
That's so true. It always ends up being different. But I don't want to stray too far from the theme of people, AI and the necessity of having people in the equation. I think that's when we talked before, we we had touched on that. We can of course talk about anything, but I want to make sure that we talk a little bit more about that.
In that sense, I believe that AI is like any other technology. It's a huge change management issue. It's a huge people issue. People have to learn the strengths and weaknesses. And because AI is so sparkling and seductive, it's hard for people to remember that it's just another technology that needs to be grappled with in the same way. So I assert that we have to take care of our people first. We have to put the human experience front and center. And instead of having one human in the loop to make sure that the AI isn't going awry, we need to surround the AI with a community of people and make it part of that community.
And what does that look like to you? I mean, I know none of us can predict the future, but what does that look like in your corner of the world?
Well, in my corner of the world, which is content, I think that it means prompting becomes a two-way street where we are not only asking the AI, we're asking it to ask us questions that help us think about new things. There's a big kind of conundrum with content, which is about knowing whether you're creating the right content, writing about the right topics. In technical writing specifically, which is part of what I do, there's the idea of the user who's out there, and you can't go up to someone who's in the middle of struggling to figure out how to use something and watch them do it necessarily. I mean, there's user testing and focus groups and things like that. But we often are writing to a ghost. And there are ways in which, despite not having direct human experience, AI might be able to poke us and prod us in directions that help us understand that ghost better. So the future to me is that as we learn what AI can and can't do, it will become a partner, and we're going to stop thinking about it in terms of, this is the world's greatest spell checker, which I think is how some people are thinking about it. And we're going to think about it in terms of new ideas and possibilities that aren't bound by the human experience.
That's really interesting about it, the partnership. I hadn't thought about that. I had not thought about that either. What might that look like? Because what you're saying is incredibly fascinating, right? Because you're writing technical writing, is why we're here talking, right? You're writing to help somebody fix a problem and do something, solve some issue or create some new capability for their organization. So, and you're right? We want to know those. We try to write around what the use case is. Like, we know this is broken. This tells you how to fix it, or we know you want to install this huge thing to do this for your organization. So what might that partnership look like?
Well, I'll answer that question with a question. If we have an AI helping us generate content, and companies that use our products have AIs that consume that content, then who's writing for whom? Is it possible that there's kind of a layer of AI talking to each other? And does that free us up to be focused on ideas and experiences? Or do we become, slaves shoveling coal into the big AI machine? It's a very weird future that we're looking at. And my hope is that by learning the strengths and weaknesses of AI, as AI becomes more capable, we start to think about work itself in a new way. If you have an AI at your company that can set up your Salesforce org for you, deal with all the licenses, deal with all the configuration, then what content do you need to read? And who writes it? Is it written by an AI? Is it written by a tech writer? How does it change the way that people relate to people if AI is handling some of this sort of detail work?
I mean, the way you're talking about it, it's almost like the Industrial Revolution, right? When you dig the Panama Canal, you don't have to have 100,000 guys with shovels. You've got these new steam tools that help you do it so much faster. It's kind of...
I think Mark Benioff has actually said that. He's talked about the fourth industrial revolution. And that was before the whole generative AI thing really took off. He was already saying that.
That's really interesting. The other area, and again, don't let me take you down any avenues that I want you to talk about things that interest you, because that's why we're here, to hear from you. But I've been reading about two things from Tesla. Like they hard coded this self-driving 300,000 lines of code, and they threw that out, and they bought a supercomputer or built a supercomputer, whatever, have a supercomputer, and they have a Neuralink end to end, which I don't really understand. But I do understand the way they train it, which is they just, like you said about the truck drivers, they just show millions and millions of videos, which which it organizes and says when this happens and that happens, and so that it can cause the car to behave when it's on self-driving or robotaxi in a more human way. And I'm wondering, to your analogy about I thought it was brilliant with the way you talked about AI freeing, right, an admin up from installing Salesforce and getting all the licenses and doing all of those things, which are very, can be very demanding tasks. If that's sort of an analogy of the way that we could look at tech writing, what are all of the potential scenarios that can play out with the way this software interacts with that?
Well, I think it does come down to a marriage of predictive and generative AI. One of the challenges sometimes with licensing and configuration, especially if you have a Salesforce org that has a lot of different features for a specific industry, is that you might have a large number of roles for people within your company that need to use the org in a different way. And you might have a lot of features, and there gets to be this 2 or 3 dimensional matrix of permissions and capabilities and licenses and things that can be hard for people to figure out. And that might be something that a combination of predictive and generative AI can figure out, where you can sort of tell it, hey, this is what we're trying to do, and this is why. What are your recommendations here? But again, as we've seen with the self-driving cars, as a matter of fact, the results are not always perfect and completely reliable. So you do need not just a human in the loop, but a community of people surrounding the AI to make sure that it's getting it right. And one of the reasons that the customer service chatbot is such a good use for AI is that, if it gets things a little bit wrong, there's an escalation procedure and nobody's going to die. And the problems that it's dealing with are often problems that have been seen before, like 100,000 customers, 100 of them are going to call and say that one particular thing happened, and a chatbot can really help with that.
Yeah, and I do agree with you about the chatbot. It's very easy to escalate and say, I need to talk to a person, usually, and they kind of will accept that. What about, we're talking about science fiction, right? You talk the Heinlein's computer. I remember as a kid watching Colossus, the Foreman Project, where, I don't know if you've seen that or read those books, where the defensive computer that controls all the nuclear weapons takes over the world because it merges with the Russian version, and then they institute world control. And there's a lot of public figures that talk about the Terminator type dangers of AI. What do you think about that?
There's a sci-fi story, I forget who it was by, I think it was Frederick Brown, where they built the world's most powerful computer so that they could ask it the ultimate question, is there a God? And it whirs and beeps and stuff for a while, and then it says, there is now, and they run towards the switch to turn it off, and a laser bolt comes out of the computer and fuses the switch. So I don't know. I'm more optimistic than that. I don't think that these apocalyptic scenarios will come to pass, but it is true that because AI doesn't have the same lived experience that we do, its priorities are different. If it has things that could be called priorities. So I do wonder if AI is in charge of systems that people rely on. I mean, imagine the philosophical question that's becoming real now. If you're a self-driving car and then you're kind of faced with a trolley problem, right? It's already happening in those ways. And then the question is, would a person do better in that situation? You could imagine. I mean, there have been cases where utility companies have had to notify people who are on like oxygen machines that there's going to be a power outage and things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of possibility for AI to make decisions about systems that humans rely on. I don't want to speculate too much. I don't know. It could be scary.
Well, and like you say, I mean, it's all turning out quite differently than we imagined, and it certainly has progressed since the calculator days. It's all I heard at the beginning was word calculator. It's just a word calculator. For people who may not know, can you describe the trolley problem?
Yes. So the trolley problem, which has shown up in a bunch of variations all over the internet in the last couple of years, is essentially there's a trolley and it's headed for a fork in the tracks, and you're standing at the switch control where you can make the trolley go one way or the other. And if you do nothing, it's going to run over 5 people who are tied to the tracks. But you have the opportunity to throw the switch and make it run over one person who's tied to the other fork. And the reason that it's a problem is because if you take that action, then you're choosing to kill that one person. And through your inaction, you might be allowing those 5 people to die, but you're not actually killing someone to do it. And I would pose the question, who is building these tracks that people get tied to? And I think that's it sort of jumps out of the problem. It's not a fair question to ask, but that's what we need to be thinking about with regard to the AI. Why are we tying people to tracks? Why are we putting somebody at this switch to make this arbitrary decision? Maybe we should be thinking about designing systems that are safer before we put AI in control of them.
Okay, that's a great explanation. It's probably one of the best explanations I've heard. But let's. This is awesome, by the way. I really appreciate the chance to talk to you. Anything else about AI? I'm not trying to put you on the spot about predictions because you're right, we don't know. But your insights are really are fascinating.
Well, as long as we're talking about things that are showing up online, there's a really funny meme that says, I was hoping that the robots would take care of the grunt work and allow people to make art and poetry rather than the robots taking over all the art and poetry so we can just work. And that's how I feel about it. I think that we're at a juncture where if we really understand what AI can do for us, we can rethink how people relate to each other. We can build a better world where we're free to create and consume experiences. I don't know if we'll do it. I mean, we've all seen sort of some of the fights that have gone on in the current political climate, and it ultimately becomes about how people are and who people are and who we are as a species. And I hope we figure out how to make the most of it.
I could not agree more. I'm still fascinated by your description of implementing a complex software platform like Salesforce or other complex software platforms. That's really fascinating. When you talk about creating and consuming new experiences, again, we can't predict the future, but what are you thinking?
Well, just to go back to that sort of simple example, if AI is writing documentation to be read by AI, if AI is driving all the cars and city buses, if AI is helping us figure out the things that otherwise we would have to sit down kind of with our head in our hands and go, okay, hold on, let's see, I think I've got this, what would we do with all that free time and mental energy? I mean, I guess it's the same question that people have to grapple with when they retire. Like, do you start volunteering? Do you take up watercolor painting? Do you spend more time with your family? Do you buy a motorcycle? Like, what could we as a world do if we didn't have to do some of this sort of plumbing stuff that keeps the world running? Could we be kinder to each other?
I mean, I guess your point is well taken. It kind of depends on us, right? As far as that future goes. And just full disclosure, we were both at somebody's retirement get together yesterday, and so your point about retirement resonates, because we were just kind of all talking about that and thinking about that, and asking this future retiree what his plans were. Anything else jump out at you, or that's on your mind that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I wanted to just take a moment and say that I've been listening to this podcast series, and I'm so excited that I have had a chance to participate. Your questions are always so interesting and insightful, and you have such a variety of amazing speakers. I'm very pleased to be counted among them. And I hope that your role as host never gets taken over by AI.
From your mouth to God's ear. No, just well, it's people put things together. I mean, we're talking about books too, right? But first, thank you. That's very nice of you, very kind of you. But people put things together, and who knows? All this. Your point about we kind of thought AI would take over all the manual jobs, and it's now taking the bar exam, right? People are, but people I think the base creativity of people putting together thoughts and structures, and as you're synthesizing, it's always interesting when you have a person in the loop. It's like watching Survivor. It's always interesting, even though it's the same damn thing every single time. It's the same scenario, but people are somewhat predictable, but always there's an unpredictability to it. And so these insights, I don't think I would get the insights from AI if I asked it the same questions that we get from you. Put it that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'm not flattering you, I promise. I just think that's what makes it so interesting. So, well, look, Peter, I cannot thank you enough. We have to do this again. I really appreciate it. We'll need to do one on fountain pens at some point.
Absolutely agree. Yes.
All right. Well, you have a wonderful weekend. And like I said, I cannot thank you enough.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm pleased and honored to be here. And I had such a great time. Thank you.
Great. So did I. Okay. It's always fun talking to you. This came out of a conversation we had just off the cuff talking about something else. So it's a great pleasure. Take care. You have a great weekend.
You too. Thanks.